I think everybody has heard of geometry, but has anyone heard of coordinate geometry? That's where we check out the properties of geometric figures using the coordinate plane. You know, the x and y axis, the quadrants, ordered pairs, all that good stuff. Today we'll review concepts from algebra that you're going to need when you start using coordinate geometry. In this case, I'm talking about calculating the midpoint. Got a question for you first. If you took 2 math tests and made an 80 on the first one and a 90 on the second one, what would your average be? Well, let's add them up and divide by 2. You should have 85. Guess what? If you know the endpoints of a segment, finding the midpoint is easy. It's the same thing we just did with the test scores. Just find the average of the x-coordinates and the average of the y-coordinates. The 2 average values are the coordinates of the midpoint. That's it. So, in a nutshell, there are times you need coordinate geometry to check out the properties of geometric figures. But before you can use coordinate geometry, you've really got to understand the concept of midpoint. And once you really understand how to calculate the midpoint, you're well on your way to understanding coordinate geometry. Midpoint. There you go.
Well, that was a fun, quick little introduction to our coordinate geometry unit, and here is the first part of it, the midpoint. We did midpoint at the beginning of the year. Let's do a quick review. When we're on a line with segment AB, we want to find the midpoint. We're just going to average these endpoint numbers. So let's take the average of -25 and for B, 13. All right, to average them, I take -25 and I add it to 13, add them together and divide by 2 for the average. That's going to be what, -12? -12 cut in half is -6. So -6 will be right in the middle, our middle point or midpoint for this. Let me just call it M at -6. Okay, now when you have an x and a y both, then it looks a little bit scary when you look at this formula even. That looks really scary, but it's still just averaging. So if you look here in the very first spot, you're taking the average of x coordinates, dividing by 2 to get that average. I'm just going to call this the x average. In the second spot, as we have 2 coordinates here, our y coordinates have been averaged to get our midpoint value. So this is the y average. You're just going to do the same thing twice for the different coordinates. Let's look at an example, see how this goes. Now I've recopied this here for you, so let me just remind you, this first spot you're doing your x's, that's your x average, and in the second location for that second coordinate you're doing your y average. This is to find the midpoint. Okay, so our example, let's plot point A at 6, -2, and point B at 4, 10. Let me actually name these. There's B and down here's A. And I'm going to give it a shot here drawing this segment. It's kind of tough with my computer pen here, but okay, that's not too bad. You can do better with a straight edge, of course. All right, let's find our midpoint. So I'm going to start by looking at my x's. 6 for A and 4 is for B. I'm going to average those, so I'm going to take 6 plus 4, divide that total by 2, and get my average. So 6 plus 4 is 10. 10 divided by 2, my average is 5. That's also for my midpoint, my x coordinate is 5. Now let's repeat that for the B, or for the y coordinate. So -2 for the A and 10 for the B. Pull those y coordinates out and let's average them. -2, add 10 to that, get that total, and then divide by 2. So I'm looking at, for the top I've got 8, and 8 divided by 2 is going to give me 4. So that's my y coordinate for the midpoint, 5, 4. And let's see how that looks on the graph. If I come over to 5 right there and then up to 4, that's right where it made the bend. It should have been on a straight line, but anyway, right there, that's going to be the midpoint for this at 5, 4. And I'm going to put tick marks on that so everybody knows. That was the midpoint. All right, your job now. Do it right now. Pause the video. Come back and you're going to see the answer to this. I want you to see if you can do it on your own, though, and make sure you show your work. All right, here's my work so you can check yours as well, but my final answer was for x, -5.5, and for y, -1.5. So here's my midpoint. Did you get the same thing? I hope so. Let's see how that looks on the graph. I've also graphed points R and Y and drawn the segment, but I haven't put the midpoint on there yet. So let's check that out. If I go over -5.5 for my x, and then I'm going to go down 1.5. I'm right in the middle of this box, and I'm on the line, which is a good thing. And so, yeah, that looks good. Does that look midpointy to you? Do these look equal? Does to me. So there's my midpoint on the graph. Fantastic. Now, a question for this next example is going to ask us to work backwards a little bit. We're asked here to find an endpoint. So that means that we're going to be given the midpoint, and we'll also know one of the endpoints. We have to find the second endpoint. And let's read through it. First of all, we've got point P at 4, 2, and I'm going to plot that. Right here is at 4, 2, point P, and point M is at -2, 5. And so right here is M, and then read on. It says that M is the midpoint of segment PB, but we have to find the coordinates of point B. So point B right now is our unknown point, and it's out at the end. So like if I'm going from P to B, it's like a road trip. I'm going maybe out to my Uncle Bob's house, and so I'm starting at Pryor's house. Here's my midpoint. This might be my rest stop, and then I have to come out further here to B. So where is point B going to be? Maybe you ought to just plop a point on your paper right now as a guess. Like maybe it's right here. I don't know. Is that point B? Quick guess. All right, so there's 3 different ways you can do this, and I want you to pay really close attention to each one and maybe rewind and look at the method again to decide which one you work best with. The first one I'm going to show you is the graph method, since we've got our graph started. And in the graph method, what you're going to do is you're basically going to build a right triangle from P to M, and you're going to basically go over and then go up to form that right triangle on those sides. And so then if we just take a copy of this, we will be able to go out again over and up and find point B. Let me show you how that works. I have to copy it, so I need it to be the exact same length. So what's the length of this horizontal segment? Let's count it out from P. I'm going to go 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. So that's 6 units long. I'm also going to note that it's going back 6 since it's going to the left, so I'm going to call it -6. Then if I count the upward, that vertical segment, it looks like it's just 3 up, so that's going to be +3. Now all I do for this graph method is I copy that triangle and use that to my advantage. Starting from M, I'm going to go the same distance out horizontally in the same direction, so that's the -6. I want you to count that length. -6, just copy it, and then going up from there, I'm going to go up the same I went before, which is 3. So this is my actual location for point B. I was off a little bit. How did you do on your guess? There's point B. Now if I extend my segment out, that should come straight out again, and these should be equal because this was my midpoint, and I have basically I've got side, side, side I've just done. Okay, so that's how you do the graph method. Now what's the answer though? Look at where this coordinate is. So we want to write the answer in here. So it looks like point B is for X. I'm out to -8 now, and how high up am I on Y? I'm at +8. So my answer would be -8, +8. That's the graph method. Now the formula method. This is for people who really don't like to take the time to draw a really good, nice, precise graph, and they just want to go kind of brute force and get the answer. So this is the way this one works. You use the midpoint formula. You remember you're going to take your x coordinates and average them. These are from the endpoints though. So my x coordinates are 4 and x. Those are my endpoints. I don't know what that is. So I go 4 plus x, and then I divide by 2, just taking the average, and set it equal to my midpoint number. And my midpoint number was given this time as -2. So you get to set up an algebra equation to solve. Okay, now I'm going to go ahead. I'm just going to split my space. I'm going to solve that in a second. But let me set up the y coordinate one. Same deal. I'm going to go with my y values of my endpoints. It's 2 and the unknown y. So adding those to average, it's going to be 2 plus y. 2 plus what divided by 2 is equal to the answer for the y value of the midpoint, which is a 5. All right, so that's set up. Now I do the algebra to solve these. So to solve this, the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to multiply by 2 and get rid of that divide by 2. Both sides that happens for. So multiplying by 2 here and multiplying by 2 on the other side. I'm going to be able to cancel the 2's on this side. And after those cancel, I have 4 plus x on this side. And then over here, I've got -2 times 2 and that's negative 4. All right, so now I just need to get x alone. X, if I want to subtract this 4 off, that'll leave me an x. Making sure to subtract 4 from this side gives me a negative 8. So that's my x coordinate. Now over on the y's, same steps. I'm going to times by 2 on both sides in order to cancel that division. So this cancels out, and after that cancels, I've got 2 plus y. 2 plus y is equal to over here, 5 times 2 is 10. And then taking away 2 from both sides, y alone is equal to 8. So look at my answers. X is negative 8 and y is 8, just the same thing I got before. Negative 8 and 8, just matches my graph method. Okay, this last method, this jump method, this is for people who are too lazy to draw a graph and they're too lazy or there's just too much to write to do the formula method. I really like this jump method. And I know we're at the end of the video, so pay close attention on this one. In the jump method, here's the steps. You list your points in order, P, then M, and then B. And I want you to notice I've got the endpoints on the outside and midpoint is in the middle. You list those and you write down what their coordinates are. So looking back, the coordinates for P, that's 4 and 2. The coordinates for the midpoint, that's negative 2 and 5. And the coordinates for B, we don't know. I'm going to leave them blank because I'm just going to put my answers right there in this jump method. Here's the way it works. Starting with the x's, you need to figure out how big is the jump to go from 4 to negative 2. How big is the jump? And I also want you to pay attention. If you're going from 4 to negative 2, you are going down. So let's call this a negative jump. I'm going to have to drop how far to get from 4 to negative 2. Well, the answer to that is 6. That's how far apart they are. So I'm going to copy that same distance and drop with my next step. I'm going to start at negative 2 and I'm going to let that drop by 6. So that's going to bring me to negative 8. Pretty cool. Okay, same thing works over on the y's. How far and what direction is the jump to go from 2 to 5? Well, that's a jump upward. That's going positive. How far? 3. From 2, if I add 3, I get 5. So I'm going to do the exact same thing again. I'm going to take 5, I'm going to add 3, and I'm going to get my answer for the endpoint. That's 8. Negative 8, 8, just like I got on the other methods. So there's 3 methods for you. You pick the one you like the best, give these a shot, and we'll practice this in class.